Di ba,
Wala pa kaming, we cannot share, ano pa, no, screen.
hindi pa.
Pwede bang paano lang? Gusto ko lang makita how it, ano.
Okay. We can share. Okay.
Wait lang ha. Wait lang ko. Okay. Okay. Ikaw, Be, gusto mong tignan?
and family planning services. In 1992, the foundation broadened its mandate from population to Population and Development, or PopDev, and it changed its name to the Philippine Center for Population and Development. As a PopDev organization, PCPD implemented projects on community-based health education and services, responsible parenthood, and adolescent development. In 2000, PCPD was reorganized as a grant-giving foundation. It supported the efforts of partners that responded to various concerns, such as housing, waste management, food security, climate change, and reproductive health. In 2020, PCPD decided to shift from giving grants to becoming a social enterprise. It is studying the feasibility of setting up a hospital that would specialize on women's and children's health care, while at the same time provide a broad range of health services to the general public. As it continues to evolve, one thing has remained constant for PCPD. Through its various transformations, PCPD's commitment is to contribute to improve the quality of life of Filipinos.
Hello, good morning to everybody. We're going to start our webinar now. And we're still waiting for people to come in. But it's 10:02 already. Anyway, we have how many? We have more than 100 attendees this morning. And it looks like it's going to be a very promising conversation. Anyway, my name is Marilan J. Dangilan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Philippine Center for Population and Development. Now, before I proceed, I would like to talk about the house rules, or the ground rules rather. There are two ways to ask questions during this webinar. Either you go to Q&A, which is there. I can see it, the icon. Or you raise your hand if you want to speak. And, you can also go through chat. And your questions will be directed to the speaker. Now, if you raise your hand, what I can do is I can unmute you so you can speak directly to the resource person. Right now, we are live streaming this on the Facebook pages of the University of the Philippines Population Institute and the Philippine Center for Population and Development Facebook pages. We intend to hold 7 more or at least 8 more if we're inspired of this sort, these webinars on very critical issues that affect us and our country. By doing this, we really hope to contribute to a change in policy, or a change in, or not even a change, but an initiative in the issuance of directives and maybe improvements in program operations. We're holding this webinar today on teenage pregnancy because in 2019, the Commission on Population drafted an executive order urging President Rodrigo Duterte to declare teenage pregnancy as, quote unquote, a social emergency. And by social emergency, POPCOM defined it as the existence of serious or prevalence of serious and unexpected situation or continuing exposure of a segment of population to life-threatening or lifelong risks and vulnerabilities requiring immediate action. Then in 2021, this year, the Commission on Population revised its draft executive order, and instead of calling it a social emergency, it now wants Duterte to declare it an urgent national priority. And it also calls for a whole of government approach to teenage pregnancy. The justifications of both the 2019 and the 2021 draft EOs are the same, except that, POPCOM in the latest draft EO focuses on minors, which is from 10 to 17. And that's why we're here to look at trends and numbers, and also hear and listen to the narratives behind such numbers. We're also here to talk about, what are the implications if one calls this an urgent national priority? What does it even mean to have a whole of government approach towards this problem? And at the back of our minds, we're talking also of what are the implications of, you know, the human resource, requirements and the budgetary requirements of declaring this a national priority. And what happens to the other priorities we have in this country, like mothers dying during pregnancy and childbirth, or let's just say stunting, that has been with us for so long and has gone unchanged. In any case, let's find out. So now, today, this morning, we really are so fortunate to have two of our experts on this particular topic. One is Professor Maria Paz Marquez, and the other one is Professor Elma Laguna. This is how it goes. Professor Maria Paz Marquez will speak first, and then to be followed by Professor Elma Laguna. Professor Maria Paz Marquez is an associate professor at the Population Institute, the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Quezon City. Her research interests include adolescent sexuality, fertility, reproductive health, and technical demography. Okay, the floor is yours, Maripas.
Thank you, Mom. Okay, good morning. I'm Maria Paz and Marquez of the University of the Philippines Population Institute. My presentation this morning is entitled The Numbers Game, What Do Data Tell Us About Teenage Pregnancy in the Philippines? Why the numbers game? A quick check with our friend Google will tell us that a numbers game or the numbers game is a way of using figures to support an argument, often in a way that is dishonest or has no real meaning. So today we'll be presenting data, lots and lots of data from various sources with the aim of clearing some misconceptions, provide a fresh look at all data from a demographer's perspective, to establish the importance of evidence-based policymaking and generally to contribute to the discourse on what is commonly known as teenage pregnancy. My presentation will start with the implications of teenage childbearing. The bulk of my presentation will focus on the levels and trends based on various sources of data. This will be followed by two aspects of teenage pregnancies that have important policy and program implications: repeat teenage pregnancies and unintended pregnancies. And lastly, an issue often overlooked in the discourse, teenage fatherhood. Let me point out at the outset that most data on teenage pregnancy do not actually refer to teenagers nor to pregnancies. That is why the term teenage pregnancy in the title of my presentation is enclosed in quotations. Two terms that are often used interchangeably in discussions of teenage pregnancy are teenagers and adolescents. Strictly speaking, teenagers or teens refer to individuals 13 to 19 years old, those ages ending in the suffix teen. However, for statistical purposes, we will find that most data on teenage pregnancy, particularly those sourced from sample surveys, are based on women 15 to 19 years old, which is a subset of the reproductive ages 15 to 49 years old. The term adolescents, meanwhile, as defined by the United Nations and WHO, and also adopted by our RPRH law, refers to any person between the ages 10 and 19, and are usually divided into young and older adolescents. However, when we speak of adolescent birth rate, we also base it on women 15 to 19 years old. As we shall see later, although their fertility experiences before age 15 will also be covered. As I had mentioned earlier, most data on teenage pregnancy that are being presented to us, excuse me, refers to births rather than pregnancies. A misnomer that arose because we are used to calling this issue teenage pregnancy. Data on births refer to live births when the fetus or the baby showed any sign of life when it was expelled from the mother's womb. Data on pregnancies, meanwhile, are often estimated from data on births, applying data on miscarriages and abortions, or from pregnancy histories and surveys that collect detailed information on each pregnancy. In this presentation, I will be using the term childbearing in most of my slides, as it is broader in scope and covers women who have a live birth or women who are pregnant at the time of the survey interview. Okay, now that we have dispensed with the definition of terms, let me give a brief overview of why we are so concerned about teenage pregnancy or adolescent childbearing. First, teenage pregnancy is widely recognized as a social and public health concern because of its association with a host of adverse health risks, not only for the young mother, but for her child as well, including heightened risks for complications during pregnancy and childbirth, which according to WHO are the leading cause of death for 15 to 19-year-old girls globally. Evidence also show that early childbearing is associated with substantial social and economic costs, such as missed opportunities at school and work, financial burdens, stigma, and shame to the girl and her family, and the consequent intergenerational transmission of teen childbearing, wherein children of teen mothers are more likely to become teenage parents themselves, thereby creating a vicious cycle of poverty. Let's take a closer look at one of the impact of teenage childbearing, and this is on women's educational attainment. Studies show that teenage mothers have lower high school diploma attainment than women without teen pregnancy experience. In a study using pooled data from 5 rounds of the National Demographic and Health Surveys from 1993 to 2013, Australia found that only 8% of Filipino teen mothers have gone beyond high school compared to 36% among women who became mothers at age 20 or older. A related study by Herin showed that Filipino adolescents who have begun childbearing before the age of 18 are less likely to complete secondary education compared to those who have not begun childbearing. Among women 18 to 19 years old, only 65% are expected to complete high school among those who began childbearing before age 18, while 72% are expected to complete high school if they did not begin childbearing early. The good news is that the likelihood of finishing high school among teenage mothers has significantly increased over time in the Philippines and in other parts of the world. Now let's take a look at the levels and trends in adolescent fertility, starting with the base population of females 15 to 19 years old. According to various censuses, the Philippines has experienced a continuous increase in the female population aged 15 to 19 over the past 6 decades, in spite of a decelerating rate of growth from 1960 to 2015. At present, this segment of the population is projected to be around 5 million, about 4 times that of the 1960 level. How does this large base population of teenage women translate to fertility? Shown in this slide is an often repeated finding to underscore the need for programmatic actions related to teenage pregnancy. When compared with our neighboring countries in the Asia-Pacific region, adolescent fertility rates have declined in all countries in the past 2 decades, with the exception of the Philippines, whose rate remains unchanged from 56 per thousand in 1973 to 57 per thousand in 2013. More recent available cross-country data in Southeast Asian countries from the World Bank database using UN estimates show that the country has one of the highest adolescent teen fertility rate in the region, bested only by Lao PDR. Okay, now let's take a closer look at Philippine data. But first, let's discuss where can we get the numbers about teenage pregnancy. Allow me to indulge a bit and discuss Demography 101. There are 3 main sources of data on teenage pregnancy in the country. First, we have sample surveys. Due to their smaller sample sizes, surveys are conducted more frequently and they include more detailed and targeted questions on fertility compared to other data sources. And compared to censuses, surveys also tend to collect more reliable fertility data. For nationally representative data, we have the series of national demographic and health surveys that have been conducted every 5 years since 1968, except the 2017 round with just an interval of only 4 years from the 2013 round. We also have the 4 rounds of the Young Adult Fertility and Sexuality Survey, which our institute has been conducting since 1982. The 5th round is actually in the preparatory stage, and we're planning to go on field to collect data by June this year. Both the series of NDHS and YAPS have a common research design and questionnaires adopted in each round of the survey, which lend themselves well to the analysis of trends on teenage pregnancy. Next, we have the CRVS, the Civil Registration and Vital Statistics System of PSA, which collects vital statistics, not the 36, 24, 36 kind, but data on vital events such as births, deaths, and marriages. Data on births are called from the birth certificates that we submit to the local civil registrar's office all over the country, submitted to the office all over the country, and forwarded to the PSA. They say that the best estimates of fertility are obtained from a universal and well-functioning CRVS system, wherein all births are registered immediately after occurrence and a birth certificate is issued for every child born. Unfortunately, in the country, many births have delayed registration. Parents obtain the birth certificates of their children only when needed for the child's schooling. Many births also go unregistered when they take place at home and if they are attended by traditional birth attendants or helots. The main advantage of CRVS data, however, is that we have annual data on births and other vital events. And lastly, we have the censuses of population. Censuses are complete enumeration of all households of the entire population of the country. It is an expensive, very expensive undertaking. That is why they are generally conducted every 10 years, although we do have mid-decade censuses like the 2015 round. Given its wider coverage, censuses have a very limited set of questions about fertility. Okay, so let's take a look first at results from surveys. Surveys can provide us a wealth of information about teenage pregnancies, but I will be focusing mainly on the levels and trends and selected differentials. Okay, the series of NHS, excuse me, show an increasing trend in teenage childbearing in the past 20 years. However, most recent data from the 2017 NDHS show that nearly 9% of Filipino women in the ages 15 to 19 have begun childbearing, which is lower than the corresponding figure for 4 years earlier. In recent years, there have been a discussion on the quote-unquote alarming rate of pregnancy among younger cohort of teens and preteens, those below 15 years old. What does the NDHS data tell us about this? In the past 25 years, the proportion of women 15 to 19 years old have given birth before age 15 are thankfully low at less than 1%, with the latest figure in 2017 at 0.3%. Where is teenage childbearing most prevalent? According to the 2017 NDHS, 3 regions in Mindanao earned that dubious distinction. The top notcher is Davao region, where 18% of its teenage girls have already begun childbearing, followed by Northern Mindanao and Sorsogon, both with 15%. NDHS data further show that teenage childbearing is associated with socioeconomic status. With increasing wealth, the percentage of teenage women who began childbearing declines, and this holds true for all survey years depicted in the chart. In other words, there are more teenage mothers among the poor, the 3 lowest quintiles, compared to the non-poor. Okay, now, what do data from our vital registration system tell us about teenage births? I'm sure everyone here has seen a birth certificate, their own, or probably somebody else's. Imagine the information listed there, and it will provide you an idea of the data available about teenage pregnancy. They have birth order, citizenship, attendance at birth, weight of the baby of teenage mothers. But take note, however, that not all of this information have been published by PSA nor available in its public use file. Okay, the CRVS data provide us with annual provide us with annual data on registered births, and coupled with population data will give us estimates of adolescent birth rates. These rates are particularly important as they are included in the global indicator framework adopted by the United Nations for monitoring the progress towards achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. As shown in this slide, adolescent birth rates show a steady declining trend in the past decade. Okay, by the way, PSA has already released the total number of registered births for 2020, but there is no breakdown by age yet, by age of the mother yet, so we cannot determine teenage births yet. Let's classify these registered births among adolescent mothers by the age of the mother. Most of these births come from the 18 to 19-year-olds, accounting for about 2/3 of births to adolescent women. In 2019, there were a total of 1.67 million births in the country, of which about 181,000 were born to women below 20 years old. Zeroing in on births among women 15 to 19 years old, the number of registered births has been declining since 2014, while the percentage share among all births shown by the line graph has been stable at about 11%. The percentage share of younger adolescents, those below 15 years old, among all births is consistently very low at less than 1% in the past decade. In terms of absolute numbers, there has been an increase in the number of registered births from 1,324 in 2010 to 2,411 in 2019, a difference of 1,000 births over the past 10 years. Okay, looking at births to women who have not reached 18 years old, the age of majority in the country, about 60,000 or 62,000 of registered births were born to these women, accounting for about 3 to 4% of annual births. The last of the major sources of data on teenage childbearing is our censuses of population. As I mentioned earlier, there are limited questions on fertility in our censuses. In fact, there were no such questions at all in the 2015 census of population. Since data from the 2020 census are not yet available, let me show the results from the 2010 census as an illustration. There are only 3 questions on fertility asked in the 2010 census, and they capture what we call recent fertility or births in the past year, and 2 questions on lifetime or accumulated fertility, the number of children ever born, and the number of children still living. In 2010, there were 4.76 million women 15 to 19 years old in the country. 6.2% of them, or nearly 300,000, already have children. Among these, 17.6% or 52,000 have more than one child at their young age. And nearly 150,000 of these women, or 3.1%, have given birth in 2009, the year prior to the census. Teenage childbearing becomes doubly problematic when the pregnancy is repeated at an age when women's bodies are not yet physiologically mature to bear a child, and when we are not yet prepared to shoulder the responsibilities that come with motherhood. A study by Maravilla et al. Using NDHS data reveals that for 2 decades, the Philippines has shown a constant and considerably high repeat teenage pregnancy experience. 1 in 5 teenage mothers have experienced repeat teenage pregnancies. This trend was evident across all regions in the country, across types of residence, meaning urban, rural, and socioeconomic status. A similar study that I did using a different data set, the 2013 Young Adult Fertility and Sexuality Survey, shows similar results. 17% of teenage mothers had another pregnancy during their teen years, 16% had been pregnant twice, and 1% of these teenage girls had been pregnant 3 times. Among teenage mothers who who are more likely to be pregnant again during their teens. These are women who are in a union, either formally married or in cohabitation, which is not surprising since having a regular sexual partner translates to greater exposure to the risk of pregnancy. Women with low education, those who were not raised by both parents, women with early sexual initiation, and women who never used a modern contraceptive method. The CRVS data also provides a level consistent with the survey results. Looking at births rather than women this time, among births registered annually in the country that were born by women 15 to 19 years old, about 17% are second or higher order births, meaning pangalawa o pangatlong baby na ng mga teenage mothers. Okay, now let's take a look at unintended pregnancies based on YAPS data. Half of teen females who have been pregnant have unintended pregnancies. 23% of the pregnancies are mistimed, meaning the girls would have wanted to wait later, while 27% of the pregnancies are unwanted, are not wanted at all. But looking at the flip side, the good news is that half of the teenage pregnancies can be considered intended or wanted at that time. Given that half of pregnancies among teenage women were not exactly wanted, did they do something to end the pregnancy early? In the survey, we asked the women this question: did you, or with the help of someone else, do something to end the pregnancy early? In other words, this is euphemism for induced abortion. And what do the data tell us? 11.2% or 1 in 10 ever pregnant teen females did something that led to the early termination of the pregnancy, and this proportion is highest among the never married, as expected, given the social stigma attached to having an out of wedlock, particularly teenage pregnancy. An often overlooked topic in the discourse on teenage pregnancy is the issue of teenage fatherhood. And one advantage of YAPS over the NDHS is the availability of data from the male perspective. In all, 2.4% of males aged 15 to 19 reported that they have gotten someone pregnant. Nakabuntis na sila. The corresponding percentage among never married or single males is only 0.7%. However, if we look at married teen males, nearly half of them admitted having gotten someone pregnant, which may imply that the pregnancy might have prompted the marriage or the live-in arrangement. So nakabuntis sila, then nagpakasal na lang sila. In addition, 4.2% of these married male teens have gotten another girl pregnant apart from their wife or live-in partner. It should be noted that unlike teenage childbearing among women, this measure is prone to bias, as men may not always know whether they have gotten someone pregnant, especially if they are not in a marital union, as males in this age group are most likely to be. Aside from information on the mother, our birth certificates also contain information about the father of the child. Shown in this slide are the registered live births whose father is an adolescent based on CRVS data. Approximately 50,000, 52,000 babies born annually were sired by adolescent fathers, and they comprise 3% of all registered births. It should be noted that a substantial 7 to 8% of registered births, or more than 100,000, have no information about the father, including their age. Hence, for more than 100,000 of annual births, we cannot determine if the father is a teenager or not. Okay, so to answer the question, the title of my presentation, what do all this data from various sources tell us about teenage pregnancy in the country? Okay, so let me summarize. Early childbearing is associated with various health, socioeconomic, and intergenerational risks to both mother and child. The country has one of the highest teenage childbearing rates in Southeast Asia. Okay, the number of adolescent mothers is substantial, about 180,000. However, while this number is a cause for concern, based on various data sources, both the absolute numbers and the percentage share of adolescent childbearing have been declining in recent years, which probably imply that the program and interventions that are in place appear to be working. We do not know what we do not know the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on teenage pregnancy and fertility in general. Okay, births among younger adults and women below 15 years old number about 2,000, and this accounts for less than 1% of all annual births in the country. About 1 in 5 teenage mothers has repeat pregnancies during their teen years, a level that has remained unchanged over the past 2 decades. Half of ever pregnant teen females have an unintended pregnancy, and 1 in 10 of them did something to end the pregnancy early. And lastly, the level of teenage fatherhood is lower compared to teenage motherhood. The wide disparity between the percentage of teen males who reported having gotten someone pregnant and the percentage of teen girls who have ever been pregnant may be attributed to 2 major factors. Number one, probably it's due to reporting error by males due to lack of knowledge of whether they have fathered a child, or number two, teenage women getting pregnant by non-teens or older persons. Okay, so as a parting shot, let me reiterate the title of my presentation. It's a numbers game. I know that I have bombarded you with lots and lots of data. Baka death by data, meron bang ganon? Parang information overload. Having a lot of data is not necessarily a good thing, which is a most pervasive misconception in the field of data science. Parang the more the data, the better, which is not the case. But what I want to say is that, yes, these data are good for evidence-based program and policy formulation, but in our quest for evidences to support our own agenda, let us be more discerning, let us be more critical of data, and let us be more careful in the use of data. Okay, before I end, let me thank my colleagues at the Institute, Dr. Grace Cruz, Dr. Medea Cabamala, and Jacob Bungaling, for their valuable assistance in putting all this data together and making sense of them. That ends my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maria Paz Marquez. That was really a very nuanced, discussion of the data that you presented to us. Hold on to your questions, please. I hope you don't mind. The next speaker that we have now is Professor Elma Laguna, and she's Assistant Professor of Demography at the Population Institute of UP. She also obtained her doctoral degree in social sciences and economics from the University of Bremen in Germany. She has a master in demography degree from the UP Population Institute and a Bachelor of Arts degree in communication and research from the UP College of Mass Communication. Her areas of expertise include youth sexuality, migration and intergenerational relationships, aging and retirement, demographic and health surveys, and quantitative research methods. Professor Laguna?
Can you stop sharing so I can share my screen? Baby. Professor Marquez, can you stop? Okay, there. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you, Professor Marquez, for laying out the empirical data on teenage childbearing. Now, what I will attempt to do is to provide a narrative. So while demography clearly is known for its bias on quantitative data and analysis, we do acknowledge that behind every statistics are lives, behind every numbers are stories, and this also need to be told and heard. So as a caveat, what I will share here is not a full qualitative analysis of existing data, but more of a description of narratives that we have culled from our own studies, usually done to guide us in formulating questionnaires for a survey or to validate our quantitative findings. And we also explore existing sources such as blogs and research report on teenage mothers conducted by scholars from other institution and discipline. So first, let me present what we got from focus group discussion we conducted among teenage mothers before the pandemic. This was part of the evaluation study that we did for Swi League Family Foundation on ARH programs of LGUs. So in most of the FGDs, the common theme is that these young girls did not plan to get pregnant. Some reported they only had sex once. No? As shown in the quantitative analysis, contraceptive use is not common. And when they had sex, they did not use contraceptives, or if they did, it was withdrawal. They did not also discuss contraceptive use with their partner. So how did they deal with pregnancy? When asked about how they feel when they found out that they are pregnant, they mentioned having mixed emotion. So there is fear of how their parents would react. There is also worry about their future, particularly about schooling, also about the relationship with the father of the child, and feeling of embarrassment because of stigma attached to early pregnancy. Most say that they were shocked, no? But at the same time, they feel excited and happy about having a child, and one or two said that they thought about ending pregnancy or getting abortion. So here are some quotes that more or less stood out. No? It is common for young girls to report that they have irregular menstruation and that they thought that missing a period for a few months is still okay until they notice that their body is also changing. For some, they view pregnancy as life changing, and having a child it gives them direction. For example, there's this one quote from Risa, not her real name. She got pregnant at 19 and she looked at it as, more like a youth rebellion. What I want to do with my life before is just to bum around. I thought if I get married, hopefully having a child will change it. So there is also feeling of regrets, knowing that they won't be able to achieve their original dreams and plans for the future. And when it comes to parental reaction, majority said that their parents were of course disappointed and got angry, but they eventually came around and eventually provided them with support. What about healthcare utilization during pregnancy? Prenatal services were availed by teenage mothers, but because majority tried to conceal their pregnancy, their first checkup prenatal checkup usually happened towards the end of their first trimester or onto the second trimester. They were also informed of their options for delivery, but most of them they gave birth in a hospital, and those below 18 were able to use their parents' health insurance to pay the bill. As mentioned, this was part of the project that we did on evaluation of LGU's programs on ARH services. So these LGUs, they provide, they designate a day for antenatal care of teenage mothers. And during the FGDs, our participants said that this move was very helpful. As one FGD participant mentioned, there is always that feeling of shame and embarrassment to go to health center for prenatal checkup, but because of the special day allotted for young mothers, she realized that she is not alone. There is a number of them actually in the same situation. What also stood out during the discussion is the low level of knowledge among these teenagers about contraceptives and the risk of pregnancy when one engages in sexual activity. There is misconception about contraceptives. For example, one mentioned that the belief that unless you have experienced pregnancy, you should not use pills. So we asked about their plans for the future. Interestingly, among our FGD participants, only a few married the father of their child. Majority are in a consensual union with their partners, and some have already broken up the relationship. Even among those who are still in a relationship with the father of their child, they admit that they have no plan of getting married, or they do not see their partner as long-time partner or husband in the future. Most of them aspire to continue with their studies after they give birth. They also mention the desire not to have another child or to have it after some time. So during the pandemic, we also conducted FGDs among adolescent girls 15 to 19 as part of PCPD's program on adolescent and maternal health. So what I will be sharing here are some highlights from those FGDs. We explored young girls' health concern during the pandemic and found that while majority consider health, health in general as important, they do not see this, particularly physical health, as a main concern during this stage of their life because they see themselves as physically healthy and fit. What they consider as main concerns, however, are their mental health, no? Issues of insecurities, for example, body image, the feeling that there's too thin, either too thin or too fat for their age. Thus, when asked about the kind of services that young people their age need, they mention counseling. So doing research in time of pandemic is definitely challenging. There is limited mobility and concern about safety of both researchers and respondents. So we are thankful that there are technologies and platforms that allow the conduct of interviews and discussion online. We have explored these options, including other sources of information. It was only last year that I started exploring vlogs on YouTube and was surprised of the materials available on different topics. So I searched, for example, topics on teenage mom, PH, and was directed to several contents by teen moms themselves. No, I pick up two contents from two vloggers who shared about their stories about being pregnant when they were 14 and 15. So one has about 8,000 plus subscribers and has posted 39 videos, the most popular of which are her teen motherhood journey. So far, she has four of those. Her 14 and pregnant vlog has 57,000 views, which was posted a year ago. The other one has 163 subscribers, and her content is really focused on being a teen mom. Her video on being pregnant at 15 has the most views, 3,000 plus. Comments that the videos generated are also interesting to explore, but that's for another kind of analysis. So, uh, what do they talk about in these videos or these vlogs? So aside from sharing about their experiences, for example, how they found out that they were pregnant and how they told their parents and friends about their pregnancy, they're also sharing about challenges and difficulties of being a teen mom. So one content, for example, is a day in the life of a teen mom, or how I lost my pregnancy weight. So they said that they created the content not to promote teen pregnancy, but to provide lessons to people their age, as well as inspiration to those who are going through the same experience. So again, what stood out from their sharing is that they really got strong support from their family and friends, as well as institutions. So these two content creators, for example, mentioned that their schools allowed them to still continue and finish the year even if they were pregnant at the time. Okay, last year, Dr. Gloria Nelson, a sociologist and professorial lecturer at the College of Public Affairs in UP Los Baños, together with Miss Marie Junipolet Gonzalez, conducted a qualitative study on pregnant teenagers and teen mothers during the pandemic. So they interviewed 18 pregnant teens and moms. Five were pregnant, 11 they became mothers last year, and two are mothers and pregnant at the same time. So they look at living arrangement and found that majority did not form their own household when they got pregnant. So 12 of those 18 are in consensual union but living with either of their family or the family of their partner. Four had already broken up with their partner and living with their family, while two are married and living independently. So results also show that, of course, economic difficulty is common, as most of their partners are engaged in informal sector, heavily affected by the pandemic, and they do not have personal income. They also reported problems accessing basic health services from health centers, for example, getting contraceptive supplies or getting free vitamins. Majority had to stop schooling, but they expressed the desire to continue their studies once after they give birth and once situation stabilizes. When asked about general satisfaction with life, they say that majority they say that they're generally happy with their life and consider their child as a blessing. So how did they navigate pregnancy no, during the pandemic. Of those who are already mothers, 11 of them, so 7 in 11 out of 11, they gave birth in hospitals, 2 in lying in centers and another 2 at home. So they mentioned being burdened by the additional cost of other tests required before being accommodated in hospitals, such as a negative PCR test or rapid test results. And they were also concerned about the risk of getting the virus while spending time at the hospital's waiting room. So, in summary, what are the narratives of teen pregnancy and motherhood in the Philippines? Admittedly, the analysis is limited. What came out from discussions, but what came out from discussions with young pregnant women and moms both before the pandemic and during the pandemic is that they were not prepared for the pregnancy. At ages 14, 15, 16, or when they had their first sexual intercourse, they do not have enough knowledge about sexuality or about protecting themselves against risk of pregnancy, as well as reproductive health services available to them. So this is the same finding that we also found in surveys. But while they are not ready, majority would eventually embrace this milestone, of course, with support from their family. So in other words, early motherhood, based from the experiences of these young moms that we interviewed, early motherhood does not end their plans. No? It got derailed definitely, but with the right support from family, from social institutions, their desire and dreams, they remain. So that's all. Thank you very much. And we look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Elma. We have here now, we're open now for we have the open forum now. And there's one question here from Professor Mary Racelis. And Professor Mary Racelis, she asks, well, I wish you could talk, but, you know, I don't have control over this. Anyway, I hope you don't mind, Professor Racelis. I'm going to read what you asked. You said, Professor Marquez, excellent presentation. However, do you have data sets disaggregated by early teen pregnancy, 10 to 14? Is there evidence of rape, incest as more significant causes in addition to quote unquote seduction and love, which would relate more to 15 to 19-year teens? Any statistics beyond these anecdotal reports? Professor Marquez, please.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Um, we do have data on early teen pregnancy, the numbers, but we do not have data specifically on evidence of rape or incest. What we have based on the 2013 YAPS is that 5% of sexual initiation of teenage females are coercive. They were forced to have sex. If this resulted to pregnancy, we do not know. But who forced them to have sex? Of course, these women to have sex, this 8%. So majority are their boyfriends, as main reason is to as proof of their love, no? But 8% of sexual initiations, of these 4 sexual initiations, were forced by their relatives. So meron talagang incest, but we do not know, we cannot relate if they resulted to pregnancies.
Okay. And but then it was still forced, but you don't have the data, the hard numbers for this.
Yeah, we
Am I
have
correct?
data on sexual initiation, but we do not know if this first sexual activity resulted to pregnancy.
Thank you very much, Professor Marquez. Now we have another question from an anonymous attendee. So thank you for the organized and informative presentation. To Dr. Marquez, in your opinion, would calling this issue quote unquote teenage pregnancy still be applicable to this day? Should we start calling it quote adolescent unquote pregnancy instead? Will it be more appropriate given the legal, social, and medical implications on availability and accessibility of adolescent health services and programs? based on your presentation, it seems to me that the data on younger adolescents remain invisible. Hence, services on reproductive health for this age group remain inaccessible. Thank you very much for enlightening us.
Okay, thank you, anonymous attendee. Okay, I agree. That's why nilagay kong quotation yung teenage pregnancy kasi parang misnomer nga siya. So I agree it should be more adolescent pregnancy because there are pregnancies that happen earlier than 13 years old. And then what's the other question? Yes, I agree that younger adolescents remain invisible. So based on the data on Vital Reg data, about 2,000 women get pregnant before they turn 15, no? Before age 15. So and it accounts for about 0.1%. Kaya siguro hindi masyadong na pagtutuunan kasi kakaunti.
Okay. There's again another question, a follow-up question by Professor Rosales, and she asks if coercion was mostly by relatives. Any evidence of increase during pandemic lockdowns? Do you have any of this, Professor Marquez?
We have no study about coercion due to the COVID-19 lockdown, sad to say.
Okay.
But if I may add, maybe
Yes,
that's
please.
that YAPS 5, once it pushes through, will be able to capture, because we took the pandemic situation into account. We will be taking pandemic situation into account.
This is for the YAPs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Another question here from Teresa Carpio. That 50% of adolescent pregnancies is intended. Now, do we have a sense of the motivations for the intention? For both of
Okay.
you, I guess.
Okay. Let me check the data. But what I can remember is that there are some girls who answered that they want to be pregnant. They want to get pregnant, so their boyfriends will be forced to marry them or to live with them. And what else? Elma, do you have?
Yeah,
I
I think there are also adolescents who would say that, if they don't have any opportunities available, there's no opportunities available for schooling, for example, or employment, then they see that maybe marriage would give them that, or having a child. So those are the things that we got from FGDs, or interviews with these young mothers.
Okay. And do you want to add to that, Professor Grace Cruz? Hello, Grace. No.
Oh,
Yeah.
Marilyn, I'm just a listener here.
You are,
Yeah, yeah, I
you're
was,
a panelist here. And that
yeah,
the
yeah,
question here, because the question is quite interesting,
yeah.
50%
So
of
yeah, that's really
yes,
a very interesting question.
yes,
What are their motivations for,
that's right.
getting pregnant or getting hitched at such an early age? So
Yeah.
we have results before that. A lot of them are already out of school prior to the experience. So, they for lack of any meaning in their life, because they are out of school anyway, and then that's one thesis in our institute that established using the YAPS data that actually most of these young girls who got pregnant are already out of school at the time it happened.
Oh, I see.
So there's a hiatus, no meaning, and then they entered into that situation.
I see. But
Probably.
still, even if they're out of school, there's still a role for the comprehensive sexuality education, right?
If they are enrolled in maybe
No.
ALS, or they are exposed
Yes.
to all this, yeah, but If
If they're
there's
out of
no, if
school,
they are out of school and there's no work available, practically they're idle youth, as we saw in the YAF's findings.
right,
That's a
right,
risk factor for them to engage in this risky sexual behavior.
yeah. And thank you so much, Professor Grace Cruz. Stay on there in that gallery of panelists. Now, another question from anonymous attendee. This is getting to be interesting. Have any studies tried to look into which indicators or multiple indicators contribute to the likelihood of a teenager to become pregnant? And can we use national data for this, or is it better to do another survey with a smaller set, like a specific city or municipality, so there can be a more targeted approach to prevent teenage pregnancy? Any of you, please, including Professor Grace Cruz?
There are a lot of studies that have examined the factors that contribute to the likelihood of teenage pregnancy. The factors that I mentioned earlier about repeat teenage pregnancy. Okay, so those are also the same factors, like if there are no parental supervision. I'm trying to look for my slides. Non-use of contraceptives, and even low knowledge of sex and fertility, low knowledge on sex and fertility. Those are some of the factors that I can remember. Pero marami ng studies, national level, both from the NDHS and from YAFS.
So local studies would not matter? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's
They
okay.
do, no? They do
Yeah,
matter,
okay.
especially for a targeted approach, right?
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
what, if I may add, also very strong is the socioeconomic status. So teenagers who are coming from a poor socioeconomic household, the poorest, they
Yeah.
have higher risk of getting pregnant. And also if their mother or other members of the family also experience teenage pregnancy, they're likely to have, they're also likely to experience teenage pregnancy. That's why we say that to some extent it's intergenerational.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
yeah, I think one of the question of that was raised is if to use a smaller data set
Yes,
that is more granular. I mean, disaggregated maybe for,
right.
unfortunately, NDHS, and even YAPS, we only have until the regional level. So provincial and city or municipality, of course, that would be very good, but it's very expensive.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, there's a question here from Roberto Ador, and he's allowed to talk. Obet, could you just please raise your questions here? Obet,
Can
are
you
you there?
please read it for me?
Yes. Your question is, are there any programs, policies, and other initiatives to address the persistent lack of data-read teens ages 10 to 14? That is the question of Obet.
Actually, there are data on 10 to 14 based on interviews of respondents 15 to 90 years old. So parang retrospective experience. It's very difficult to interview yung younger adolescents in below 15. We have discussed that in YAFs. Kung isasama namin yung interviews, pero for ethical reasons, so you ask them about sex, you ask them about pregnancy, parang mahirap magtanong sa mga below 15 years old. Pero nakukuha namin yung data whether they got pregnant before age 15. But to interview teenagers below 50. Oh, there's another study. Siguro Elma can
Yes. Uh,
share UNCS.
Yeah, this is the longitudinal cohort study of Filipino children. It started in 2016. No, so we are following up children who were 10 years old in 2016 until 2030. So a 15-year study. So that's one. It's being conducted by Office of Population Studies. We are doing the data collection for Luzon. So that's another source of data for 10 to 14. And I mean, the advantage of this data, of course, is longitudinal.
Okay, thanks a lot, Elma. Elma, there's a question here and also for Maria Paz. You know, this is from Friendly Care. It's Friendly Care is asking when the first sexual initiation happened in school and out of school. Do we know the conditions that fomented this? Is speculating that the pandemic may have shut down, limited these conditions.
Okay. Uh, most sexual initiations of the youth happened in the home. Either dun sa bahay nung babae or bahay nung lalaki. So, walang parental supervision. So, but I don't know kung halimbawa sa pandemic, everyone is at home, kung if they will be able to initiate sex.
Yes, indeed. And one more question here, which which is similar, which could be related to this, is from Marit Kabugon. What is the impact or influence, if any, of social media, especially Facebook, on the behavior of adolescents in general, girls in particular, as far as sexual activity is concerned? The proportion of teenage pregnancy to total number of pregnancies seems more or less stable over the years. Please, any of you?
So I think if we look at the 2013, we see that the yung use of social media is still hindi pa ganon, no, similar to how it is now, no. So but we see that those who are more involved, they're likely to be at more risk of teenage pregnancy. But it's not definitive, no. So we are exploring it in this round of YAPS, the fifth round. And when we did a preliminary preliminary analysis we of course, as part of preparation for the questionnaire, we know that the way we ask media questions in the previous YAPs, they're so outdated, and we were actually surprised on social media use and how influential it is now to young people, particularly now during the time of pandemic. So we don't know how it will affect sexual offline, sexual activity, but we already found that they use this social media also for exploring other sexual activity online.
Okay. Um, how about you, Professor Marquez? Do you have any say on this?
Social media on teenage
Yeah, their
pregnancy.
behavior, yes.
Sexual.
Yes. Oh, I can't remember any study that examine that using YAFS data, but it's probably one that we will investigate in this round, in this coming round of YAFS, because there are a lot of questions about social media in
Yeah.
in YAFS 2021.
Yes, and related to that, there are two questions here. One is from Danica Magtubo, and she says, thanks for the presentation of the data. I'm interested to know if included in the studies or maybe in the future, the exploration of what young women did to end their pregnancy and how, and the gestation. And another question related to this is, do we know, this one is from the anonymous attendee, AA, do we know the preferred or engaged providers for ending pregnancy? This can inform programmatic initiatives.
Okay, unfortunately in YAFS or even the NDHS, we did not ask. We did not ask that. Even in YAFs, as I mentioned during my presentation, we did not ask directly, but we asked, did you, parang hindi namin mention yung term na abortion, but we asked, did you, with the help of someone else, did something to end the pregnancy early. And then wala nang follow-up question kung paano or kung sino ang gumawa. But we asked for each pregnancy of the woman. So I don't know if we're still in the questionnaire formulation stage of YAPS right now. Probably we will discuss if we can include that particular question. There's an
Yeah.
abortion study by UPPI and AGI, Alan Guttmacher Institute, but
Yeah.
this is an medyo old na study. Meron yung mga information about that.
Yes. In relation to that, because since you're going to ask questions, anonymous attendee has one more question. Have we taken into account the evolving capacity of children side by side with their best interest and how it figures in their ability or lack thereof to decide and give full, free, and informed consent to bear children? We have child protection laws precisely because children should be afforded special protection until they're able to make informed decisions on their own.
If I may add,
Comments on that? Yes, please.
yeah, in the preparation for YAPS 5, that's one of the suggested area that should be explored. It's the ability of teenagers to decide, no? Self-efficacy measures maybe.
Yes,
But in previous YAP, definitely we have not explored this, but I think this is an interesting area to study.
I
And
think so too. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. The
our
evolving
experts
capacity of children.
yeah.
Exactly. Now, what's this? I think there's a question here from Roberto Ador, and he asks, given this data, he says, so should it be a national priority? And another related question is, are there any program or policy recommendations to address this issue to ensure that it is given national priority? This is from Faith Bacon. And then another related question related to the national priority issue is this from Friendly Care. Can the presenter say that there is a quote unquote emergency in Davao, North Mindanao, and Soc-Sargen, but not in the whole Philippines? Is there regional in-depth data? So maybe a targeted approach is needed here. Now, these three are all with the main purpose of this study. Three questions here. Friendly Care, Faith Bacon, and anonymous attendee. I mean, Roberto Ador. So please, any of you, and please, Dr. Grace Cruz, you're more than free to join them.
Okay, I'll go first.
Good.
To declare an emergency in Davao, definitely these three regions with the highest prevalence of teenage pregnancy should really pay attention to this social issue. But I'm not really sure about declaring it as an emergency, because what does it mean? What does it mean for a social phenomenon to be a social emergency? So and I think it's also important to look into, we actually did an analysis of some of these regions using the 2017 in DHS, looking at unmet need and to explain fertility level. And we found that maybe one findings, one explanation is that it's something that these young girls, young women also wanted. They intended to get pregnant at that time. So, and if we look at patterns, most of these teenage pregnancy, they occur at ages 18 to 19, 17, 18 to 19. So maybe a regional in-depth analysis will shed some light on this. And we can also look whether there is a substantial increase from previous years or decades. And yeah, that's my view.
How about you, Professor Marquez?
Um, Okay, I agree. I don't think there is a need to declare an emergency in these three regions or anywhere else in the country if it's regarding teenage pregnancy, because at this time we are all being challenged by a pandemic. We have other problems that we should give priority to, primary which is of course COVID-19, which have exacerbated yung hunger, unemployment, and poverty. I believe those are should be prioritized more than teenage pregnancy, kasi data have shown na nagde-decline naman. So parang nag-work effective yung mga programa natin. But what these programs are, I cannot say. Siguro we need to study ano nga ba yung bakit nagde-decline yung teenage yung trend sa teenage pregnancy, either in from NDHS data or from Vital Reg data. Ano yung ginagawa nating, mukhang may ginagawa tayong tama. Ano nga ba yung ginagawa, ano ba yung ginagawa nating tama? Ano ba yung nag-work? And focus on this. Focus on this in these programs, in these interventions in succeeding years.
Okay, thanks. But in your data, in your presentation, you said that the 10 to 14 age group, that there is an increase in the numbers of pregnancies in this age group.
Yes,
But
pero 1,000
yeah,
over the 10-year period.
yes. So are we saying that it is not an emergency, but it is a problem, right? Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so it's an issue. We should be concerned with the issue of teenage pregnancy, but I don't think it is an emergency.
Then another question to that is from anonymous attendee. Then how can legislation help with this issue? Are there any laws in place right now to aid teenage mothers or to slow the prevalence of teenage pregnancy? What sort of legislation do you think our country needs to combat this issue? Which is also, there are two other related questions on legislation here, which are similar.
Yeah, Mr. Cruz already mentioned it. CSE, Comprehensive Sexuality Education, full implementation of RPRH law, repeal of the provision that give, limit access of young teenagers to reproductive health. So those kinds of policies, they have to be revisited and strengthened, I think. So that's it. And maybe a more holistic approach to youth development. So education still important, provide them opportunities and options. So yeah.
So that that's the CSE, the comprehensive sexuality education, that's in the RH law. But then I don't know the status of implementation of the CSE right now. That's going to be, by the way, another of our webinar topics. So yes,
Yes.
actually it is a webinar topic of ours, and where we invite the DepEd and other people to talk about it. And there are questions here that plenty of questions that are so interesting actually, and we have time, so I'd like you to answer them, please. This is from Teresa Carpio. As mentioned, Davao, North Cotabato, and Soc-Sargent are the top three regions with high teenage pregnancy. Cultural practices of early marriage are common in other regions of Mindanao, but does not reflect the patterns and data on teenage pregnancy. Can you please make a comment on that or try to answer that?
We have an expert on marriage. I think Dr. Kabamalan.
He's here.
Yeah, she's
He's
here.
here.
So
He's
maybe
here.
can you shed light on this? So what do we see in terms of marriage pattern? And if there's any regional data on marriage, for example, how old do they get married? And whether it's younger in these regions, so to capture those cultural practices. But we acknowledge that, of course, some of this early pregnancy could be due to early marriage, which is a common practice in some regions of the country.
So Uh, Professor who? I'm sorry, Kabawatan?
Kabamalan. Kabamalan.
Kabamalan.
Yeah. I'm not sure if but
I
she's,
don't think he's here.
yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Professor Marquez? Could you please answer this?
Okay, cultural practices.
Yes.
Yes, again, based on YAF's data, we interview a number of Muslims. So I think data show that they get married at an earlier age than the other youth. And in terms of fertility, I'm not sure about teenage fertility, but overall fertility, it's higher among Muslims. It's higher in in some ethnic groups.
Oh,
Um, and I think that's a good area for research on
yes.
cultural practices related to pregnancy, because even in the implementation of the 4 Ps program, we had a study evaluating 4 Ps for GIDA, geographically isolated disadvantaged areas. And one of the findings is that some ethnic groups in Mindanao are not able to comply with the facility-based delivery requirements because of some cultural beliefs, like ayaw nilang gusto nila sa bamboo daw na birthing area. They do not want to have medical health personnel na makakita sa bodies nila. So I guess ganun din siguro sa lalo na sa teenage pregnancy. Unfortunately, both NDHS and YAPS cannot provide answers to this kasi maliliit lang yung mga respondents, no, on members of this ethnic group. So siguro dito pumapasok yung mga targeted na study na kahit siguro more on qualitative studies.
Okay, thanks. Going back to that legislation part, huh? Aurora Kilala, and she's from the Philippine Legislators Center for Population and Development. Am I right? Yeah. The amendment of she says that the amendment of the provision in RH law on requirement of written parental consent for minors to be able to access contraception is found in the bills filed in the 18th Congress. So the bills are comprehensive in such a way that not only is age restriction repealed, amended, but they also strengthen the mandatory comprehensive sexuality education and provide social protection for adolescents who are already parents. And that's what you were saying, Professor Elma, about the need for support for these young teenage mothers. That's what Aurora Kilala's comment is. It's more a comment rather than a question. So I'm just saying it. And that's one. She says that there are bills filed already in Congress, and this is where the legislation comes in. Now, there is another question here, but it's related to YAF. So probably she can ask that from you later on. And here from Elizabeth Tan, she asks, being at risk of repeated pregnancy, is it possible to recommend the use of contraception?
Definitely.
Yes.
Young girls, yes.
Oo, lalo na yung postpartum family planning.
So they have to.
Yes.
Now, another one is Professor Midea Kabamalan. You can please talk about or else respond to the question of Teresa Carpio regarding cultural practices of early marriage that are common in other regions in Mindanao.
Yes, magandang
Yes.
umaga po.
Ay, magandang
Yes,
umaga rin po.
Medea Kabamalan po from Population Institute. Yes. Actually po yung sasabihin ko ay nabanggit na rin ni Dr. Laguna and Ma'am Baby Marquez kanina. There are indeed some cultural practices whereby some are allowed to actually marry earlier. Kahit na po 18 years old ang by law sa atin, but we do respect halimbawa among Muslims, they are allowed to marry earlier than 18 kasi mayroon silang ibang sinusunod na mga laws, okay? I also wanted to mention, actually mayroon ng konting dissociation ang marriage at saka yung pagkakaroon ng anak. Okay? So kung noong una parang prerequisite ang marriage to having children, ngayon nawawala yung yung link na yon. So parang hindi na ganun ka-importante ang marriage in order for one to have children. Okay. So hanggang doon na lang po yung babanggitin ko sa ngayon. Salamat po.
Thank you very much, Professor. And going back to maybe YAFs, because there are two questions on YAFs. One question is from Sabrina Gakad, and she says, YAFs looks into respondents' views related to virginity or premarital sex. And I guess it's also related to our topic now. And I am wondering, she asks, if traditional views on relationships and the role of women were also prevalent in the qualitative research. And if there may be evidence of these views changing among the youth towards sex, positivity, and enjoying sexual relationships.
I think in both quantitative surveys as well as qualitative research, there is still the traditional view of women. Ibig sabihin yung role as homemaker, for example, instilled pa rin yun on young girls. So they're still expected to take care of the children, of the family. So about changing views on sex positivity, unfortunately, this area we have not explored yet, but I think we can explore later in YAFs 5.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks a lot. How about you, Professor Marquez? Anything to add?
Wala na po akong nadagdag.
Okay, thanks a lot. And there's another question here about the minors, quote unquote, from ages 10 to 17. Usually data is collected from 10 to 19 or 10 to 14, 15 to 19. But then now, the question is, why 10 to 17? And does it matter in the numbers of teen pregnancies, in the data? Does it matter? Could you please respond to that?
Okay, I don't know why the focus now is 10 to 17, but most teenage pregnancies occur to women 18 to 19.
Okay. 18 to 19. So, but in the draft EO of the Commission on Population, it specifically states, 10 to 17 as being the age group that they're looking at. Would you know? Yes.
Marilyn, I think that the reason why they're focusing on less 17 and below is
Yes.
because
Why
they're
is that?
focusing on minors.
Yes,
And of course, in the Philippines, 18 is when you become,
yeah, minors.
Yeah.
But then my question is, would this matter, or does this significantly alter the data that Professor Marquez, presented in terms of teen pregnancies? Would it?
That's why I think we need to look more closely into these boxes where we classify our young people
Yeah.
and see precisely where is the risk of pregnancy and childbearing at its peak. And as a result will show, it's really happening when they're 18, 19. There are a few that are happening, starting at 10, 15, very early on. But as Professor Marquez has mentioned, the increase has over the how many decades is just 1,000. It's increasing, but not really significantly. But ang dapat babantayan natin is where the risk is really happening to these young bodies. And the data will show that it's heaviest when they are 18, 19. Tama ba, baby? So I think when we look at appreciate all this information provided to us, let's not be bogged down with classifications like minors, etc. But really look at, specific ages vis-a-vis what it means in terms of, their maturity,
Right.
ability to, their health implications.
Yes. Thanks a lot, Professor Grace Cruz. And there's one of our attendees. His name, his or her name is, I'm sorry, Kairodin Amerol. And Kairodin asks or says, it's interesting to have research in BARM, like the number of teenagers that get pregnant and married. Now, there's another comment from Jing Pura, FYI only. A research on child early forced marriage by Plan International Philippines, conducted with research partners in BARM, is about to be completed and published this May, June 2021. Thank you so much, Jing Pura, for that. So I hope this answers Kairodin Amerol if there's any study to this. Yes. Thank you so much. And the other question is, with social protection, do we have anybody here from the Commission on Population? None. Well, anyway, so there seems to be no more question. Only 21 questions. Only 21 people ask questions.
In the chat box, there are still questions.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So from Friendly Care, for example, about how CSE is being implemented now in light of online
Yeah.
learning. I don't know if we have representatives or attendees from the Department
Education.
of Education that can shed light on this.
I don't know either, but it's going to be really one of our more critical, it's going to be part of our webinar series and conversations.
Yeah.
And also, Roberto Ador earlier asked, so should this be an emergency given the data that you presented? Should this be an emergency or a national priority given the data? I think that has been discussed. And his next question was, assuming that it's not, but it's still a problem. So do you think POPCOM needs to spend its money elsewhere? What target is needed in terms of teen pregnancies? Would you care to answer, please?
On the
Especially
question
about the target in terms of teen pregnancies.
on whether it should be a national priority, I echo the earlier opinion of Professor Marquez that so far the data does not seem to point out that there is an urgency. So, but it is a problem that we have to deal with. And again, the declining trend would imply that maybe some programs are already working, there's already improvements. So I think we just need to identify what those programs are and strengthen them. And yeah, about the 10 to 14 pregnancies on 10 to 14, 1,000 increase over the span of 10 years is still, it's not totally negligible, but it's a different kind of, we can look at it in a different way because as pointed out by Professor Rosales early on, there might be issue about violence or abuse. So it's different from the
Yes.
other issue that we
Right.
usually associate with teen pregnancy. So that's my.
How about you, Professor Marquez?
So I reiterate my stand that we need to be concerned with the issue of teenage pregnancy. The number of lives, I agree, whether 1,000, 2,000 is no joke. But then the data show what I believe are significant strides. I myself am surprised, no? Significant strides in curbing teenage pregnancy. We have already made a dent. So what we need is, again, to strengthen whatever programs are already in place. And another takeaway that I got from Elma, Dr. Laguna's presentation, is we should not treat teenage motherhood parang as a life sentence to poverty. So parang pag nabuntis ka, makawawa ka naman hanggang dyan ka na lang. So parang rather, parang may bump lang. And then, resilient naman ang Pilipino. So kahit may bump, so ma-overcome, we need just to put in place yun nga, yung mga social protections, including yung measures that will ensure that they can go back to school, no, after having
Right.
after getting pregnant at an early age.
So the trajectory of their lives of teen mothers are not singularly was this directed towards a doomsday scenario. That's what Professor Laguna and you are saying. But there's a comment here from Danica Magtubo. 10 to 14 pregnancies, whether 1,000 over the last 10 years, I think is still problematic, especially when partners of these adolescent girls are older men. It's a comment.
Yeah.
Yes, and they are older men, as we've seen. But another related question that somebody asked me prior to this, because she couldn't attend, is, could you please ask the presenters whether teen mothers build their own families or form their own families as we know it, And
No.
No.
In our FGDs, we
Yes.
found that a lot of them would just stay with their parents. No, they don't form their own households. So it's misleading to say that there will be about 130,000 teenage mother-head families.
Yes. So you're
It's
saying that
funny.
they don't form their own households and families like, the way older people do.
No, no.
Okay. That was the question I was asked, requested to ask you. But then going back to this issue of declaring it an emergency, Chi Valido here says teen pregnancies are high risk pregnancies and life threatening. While the numbers are disturbing even more so, she says, because they could die. If only for that, then it should be an emergency. That's her comment. And I don't think she's not asking any questions. That's just what she believes in. So, and then earlier you said, Professor Marquez, that the teen pregnancies from 10 to 19 especially are declining. Then Jing Pura here made a comment. Then something must be working, and she asks a question. But we should know what this something is, right? So that it's purposive, intentional, rather than chamba lang.
Yeah.
So, di ba? I agree. I truly agree with that. So would you know what's working? I don't know why it has declined from 15 to 19. I can only speculate, and I don't want to speculate without evidence. Maybe this is one thing we should look into.
Yeah.
Yes, baka may study to
Yeah.
examine that. Ang worry ko lang kasi, so declining nga siya, pero I don't know, I have no idea what the impact of the pandemic, of the lockdown. So we had estimates about teenage pregnancy based on projections, no? Last year, pero based on the data released by PSA, it seems yung overall fertility, not just teenage, had gone down by 200,000. So from 1.6 million in 2019, naging 1.4 million in 2020.
Okay.
So malaking drop siya. So that's something na I'm excited about to know anong nangyayari. So baka naman whatever yung strides na gawa natin earlier, baka bumalik dun sa back to the high levels previously. I don't know.
And also, if you look at births in December, according to PSA, yung ina-expect natin kasi yung 9 months. So we had the lockdown in March, and then the expected birth will be December. So a lot of people were saying that there will be a baby boom, but we did not see. Actually, births in December, registered births in December was 45%. There's a 45% decline. Halos nangalahati.
Oh, really?
So this is still an ongoing phenomenon, this pandemic. We still don't know, although evidence from other countries already show that instead of a boom, they're actually seeing a bust. No? So
Right.
yung ano natin dyan is maybe I think I would always I would argue that hindi naman kasi ano, maybe people are thinking about being anxious because of the pandemic. So yung decision even of the children of these
Right.
young girls will be more rational. So it's not just that because they're in lockdown and they have nothing to do, they would go and procreate. So
And
there's still
some,
a lot to know. That's
no,
definitely.
but it's a very good point actually raised by Jing Pura. And Friendly Care also said agree what is the chamba factor. That's what Friendly Care is saying now. We must know it. But we all know CSE is the other major missing link that can educate our adolescents and make this sustainable even after the pandemic. That's Friendly Care. So now we hear from Michael Cabrera, who is with the DepEd. For CSE, this is Michael Cabrera speaking. Um, we conducted the online training of teachers in 2 batches last September 2020. And we also conducted orientations on CSE for DepEd supervisors and school heads this year. Also, several schools divisions already conducted their rollout CSE in their respective SDOs districts. So, Educate DepEd is now in the process of drafting the orientation training for PTAs and junior and senior high school students. At the same time, Michael Cabrera said, you want to know more? You reach Dr. Rosalie Masilang, the CSE focal person of the DepEd. Thank you. There. That's it. So, but CSE, to everybody, we're going to have a webinar on that, and we're inviting the DepEd to air that and other, reactors to the DepEd. Okay. So we have here another one from Marit Kabugon. Is there any data or studies on teenage mothers abandoning or literally dumping their newborn babies? We hear such stories in the news. The mothers are always condemned without any questions asked about the father of the baby or other circumstances such as very young age of the mother. Could you please, any comments on that?
I don't think we have data on this, unfortunately, but we only have data on whether they did something to end the pregnancy, but about dumping newborn babies, no, we don't have.
How about you, Professor Marquez? I don't know.
Um, we have a question in YAFs. What they plan to do with the baby after the pregnancy, whether they will have it adopted and so on. But I don't remember anything about dumping the baby. But then YAFs was in 2014, no? Kaya medyo matagal na. So we need to look at this coming YAFs this year. Baka lalabas yung issue ng dumping ng baby.
In any case, there's another question related to now this one is related to not dumping anymore, but to education again, but not CSE. This is from Aryan May Nakar. Knowing that the source of sexual education or information that adolescents get come from other sources outside the family, such as peers, media, and so forth, and the larger that their chances of misinformation, is there a program in terms of educating parents, in terms of making sexual education coming from parents not a taboo inside their homes?
I think POPCOM has programs on parental communication with children. So I'm not sure if it's still ongoing, but yeah, we have that.
And this question is related to another question, very similar. This is from Faith Bacon. She writes, laws are not in favor of teen pregnancies and employment or opportunities are also not available. So given the data of them living with their parents still, it does put additional burden to the older parents and maybe future research could address this effect on the family. I think it's a very interesting.
Definitely.
That's a very interesting point. Yeah. So there. Now, Sabrina Gakad asks, for a link to your data, but she's from the. You please send that to me. I'll send it to her.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, there are people here thanking all of you for a very informative and interactive webinar. Um, and there seems to be no more question. But going back to Teresa Carpio's question on Mindanao, we're jumping because the comments just come later. This one is from Professor Mary Racelis. Professor Racelis says, research we did among Muslim ethnic groups showed that because teenage daughters in high school have to study in a town away from their home communities, generating high pregnancy risk. Some parents, fearing poor supervision there, opted instead to arrange their early marriage and dropping out of school. Question, should LGUs focus on programs to enhance alternative supervision processes in town dormitories as part of effective RH implementation? Could you please answer that?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. And this has been raised, as I mentioned, the FGD that data that I shared, it was for Swilig Family Foundation's evaluation of ARH program in cities of Cagayan de Oro and Puerto Princesa. And they already identified that one of the risk factor of teenage pregnancy is that, a lot of these young students, they're staying in dormitories and boarding houses without supervision.
Oh,
So
okay.
to some extent, maybe institutional dormitories like those based in university can have some programs, but private boarding houses, for example, it's something that maybe the LGU can explore.
Okay. How about you, Professor Marquez? Any comment on Professor Racelis?
Wala na po akong comment.
Okay, it's 11:45. Actually, 11:42. I'm sorry. And Professor Medea Kabamalan says, if anyone is interested to join and contribute, hey folks, listen to this. If anyone is interested to join and contribute to the refinement of the YAFS questionnaire in a workshop we are holding on May 24 to 25 from 9 to 11 a.m., please send email to yaps5.upd@up.edu.ph with your name, position, office, contact number, and topic of interest. How can we make this public?
Hello po, Medea po.
Yes.
Sa ngayon po, hindi pa po siya public yung because we're refining the questionnaire, but the
Oh,
data
okay.
will be made public po once we have gathered the data and produced the public use file. Much has been said about the YAPs, and there were questions na mayroon bang study na ganito, na ganyan, pwede bang ma-explore sa YAPs and other studies. I would just like to mention na, we are listening to all the suggestions. In fact, we had incorporated a lot of suggestions from earlier consultation meetings with stakeholders. But to manage expectations, we are not able to incorporate or include all questions po. Mayroong mga specifics kasi na mga tanong na which probably cannot be addressed by the YAPS survey, which is national in scale. Baka po parang sabi nga focused or granular or parang ganyan yung mga study na yon. So yun lang po ang gusto naming sabihin. But again, if anyone would like to contribute to the refinement of the YAPS questionnaire, we're holding the workshop on not on Monday but next Monday, and please do send us email. Salamat po.
Great. Now, that's an opportunity for all of us to contribute to YAFS. After all, YAFS is such an influential tool for policy making. So now I see no more questions. And there are a lot of, there are comments here thanking the panelists and the organizers, for a good learning experience. And I think it's time we close. But before we close, I would like to really thank the UP Population Institute. I would like to thank Professor Elma Laguna and Professor Maria Paz Marquez. And I would like to thank Dr. Grace Cruz and Professor Medea Kabamalan for their participation in this webinar. I also would like to stress that somehow we were able to raise the issues. Should it be a national priority? A lot of attendees questioned that, raised that question, and your answers were that the data don't support it. And the other question was, should it be targeted instead? And you also said that until we see the data, it should be a really judicious use of the data that we need. Of course, others among the attendees disagreed, and they said that it's still a big problem. Yes, it's a problem, but to call it a national urgency, a national priority, these are two different things. It's like saying that I have a problem with my ingrown toenail as compared to, my appendix is bursting. It's something like that. The degree, I think, is a matter of degree, but that will be, we will see. We will see how this will do. Now, everybody's thanking us and Friendly Care, and Friendly Care and some other participants are thanking all of you and all of us for hosting this webinar. But before you go, I would like to say that our next webinar will be on May 29, 3 p.m. And the title of our webinar is Magpapabakuna ba kayo? And Dr. Anna Ong Lim from UPPGH will be our main speaker. Okay. Thank you so much, really. Thank you. So now I officially end this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank